How you doing, Dan?
Good. How you doing, Will?
It has become a beautiful day.
Good.
It's been very cold recently, despite
Yeah.
you. And uh, and last night I went to see the Mets in the very cold weather. They lost to the A's, which was unfortunate. But
They lost to the A's, which is another warm. It's a warm weather team. They lost
yeah, but
in the
the A's
cold.
are also completely underfunded.
Yeah, which
They are
makes it
basically fire
makes
saled because the owner wanted an excuse to move them to Las Vegas.
okay. So they're scrappier.
Um, we should not have lost to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah.
They play in a minor league park in Sacramento.
Yeah.
They don't even have a real home stadium. They don't acknowledge that they're the Sacramento A's.
Right.
They've got like Las Vegas. They've got this Las Vegas patch on their arms, and they don't even have a stadium like approved in Las Vegas yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's
team without
crazy.
a home.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. So I guess yeah, maybe I'll get to see them in Sacramento before they move. Yeah.
Yeah,
I haven't been to a ball game in God, I don't know how long. My dad used to take us to see the Sox when we were kids.
nice.
I got to say, yeah, and the Fenway was a nice place to see baseball. But my sister was a whole lot more into it than I was.
Uh-huh.
So they continued to go down to, I guess at the time it was Candlestick before it turned into 3Com Stadium or something like that down in the South Bay.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah, I don't.
coldest park in the Western Conference, they always said.
Yeah, um, never made it out to Candlestick. When I was a kid, I actually was an A's fan because I lived in Oakland when I'm from like 2 to 5.
Hmm.
And then I went back in my mid 20s for a few years.
Hmm.
I was there for Loma Prieta when right on an hour before the game was going to start, a massive earthquake, and
Wow.
if it had been an hour later, because there was damage to the stadium. That was
Hmm.
the Sox. Yeah, that was the A's versus the Giants.
Wow. And did they played it?
Oh yeah, they played it like an hour. I think I believe they played it. But I can't remember.
Yeah.
It was
Oh,
30 plus years,
right.
1989. But
Yeah. Yeah.
I,
Hey, Chris, we're talking about
I,
California.
Yeah,
yeah,
no, as soon as he said Loma Prieta and earthquake, I knew which game he was talking about.
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So yeah.
I,
So
was, I
I
was living I was living in Oakland at the time as a early 20s.
Up to Billy Bean years too, wasn't
I wasn't hardly following
it?
it. No, it's before. This was the Bash brothers. This was McGuire and Ken Canseco. Yeah,
mm,
well before Billy Bean. Billy Bean.
Yeah.
oh, yeah. So I've decided to accelerate my move to Northern California. I'll be rather. I discarded the idea. It was just too much for my brain to handle of going on this 3.5 week road trip to the east. So once I jettisoned that, then it seemed to make sense to move to California while I was driving out to visit in late May. So yeah, 7 more weeks. I'll be living in California.
Time for wildfire season.
Yeah.
That gives you just enough time to do Disneyland, though.
Yeah. Oh my God. My sister does Disney like every year or so.
Hmm.
She and her husband go. I mean, they don't have any kids. She just likes Disney. I think she likes that part. She doesn't really love Disney World, but she likes the
Oh.
old park.
If you're gonna do it and do it one day, um, the having done it many times, Armenian Genocide Day is really the day to go.
Okay, well,
Hey,
I don't think I'm gonna go, but
You will see a good number of people with Armenian Genocide t-shirts, but otherwise, like the park attendance is pretty quiet and tame, and
mm,
it's a good day if you want to try and do all the rides.
all right. Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna. It's not gonna be a top of my list.
And all the schools in Glendale are closed, so the
Mm.
kids can go to the parades and remembrances, but just a few sneak down.
That's funny. So we sort of got off, and I guess we're still missing Tim. He was sick, and then who knows what's happened in his neighborhood. They may not have any internet, but hopefully everything's okay
Yeah.
physically with his situation. But we kind of got on two tracks, I guess. You and I sort of spent some time, Chris, on 5 and 6, and then Eric and Will last week, and I kind of went over a little bit of the same territory, and we had sort of planned to make a stab at 7, 8, 9, I think,
Yeah.
but without really kind of being committed to how far along we would get. But I guess we should try to do that.
I just was paging through 7, 8, 9. Did I page through? Yeah, the it's 6, 7, yeah, seven.
Yeah, so maybe 6. Yeah, maybe a kind of a return to 6 a little bit if we
No,
want.
no, I'm just paging through because I read I finished the book.
Yeah.
But going back to where I was, wait, I just don't remember which chapter is which.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, they
7.
There's so
Yeah,
much they all kind of bleed
part
together
2.
after a minute.
It's one of the things that struck me kind of throughout all of these, because it applies to 6 in this. He tells this story about Alice and Bob, trying to beat Eve and creating a language. And then later on, I think in 7 is where he talks about bots a lot, right? And kind of once again, I thought he was being a little bit maybe deliberately vague about this concept that he's raised of sort of intelligence and consciousness being two different things, and these devices, these algorithms or AIs having intelligence but not necessarily consciousness.
Yeah,
But when he says bots, it's like, okay, wait a minute. Bots are automation. He's talking about that. When he's talking about bots, he's talking about sort of the inscrutable nature of their motivations. Well, that's bullshit. They don't have motivations. They're programmed by people who want to amplify a particular piece, propagandistic message, or side of a political debate and that sort of thing. It's not like people are, sort of turning them loose and say, oh, let's see what they come up with.
I think that's necessarily accurate. I mean, again, I think that larger sort of drive for bots is, again, for to make somebody money. Now,
Yeah.
maybe they make money in service. Maybe somebody's paid them to send their botnet to do maybe do a certain thing. Propose a certain political view, political message, or whatever. But yeah, again, I think it's the same motivation we get from the paperclip
Yeah.
thing. They've been
Okay.
told to do a thing, and
Okay.
it's still a motivation.
So then in that narrative, what he's assuming is that somebody has said to the botnet, go out and maximize engagement. And then what the bots are doing is they are sort of assessing the landscape and saying, well, the best way to maximize engagement is to pick one of these sides. And I mean, that's a multi-step decision tree.
Or even again, I mean, a specific botnet, could be sent, back to sort of what you were originally suggesting there, which was, yeah, I mean, a specific botnet, maybe it's not so much maximize engagement, but it is in fact, send out, a political message, amplify political messages of a certain type,
Yeah.
that's also motivation, though. Again, whether or not it's, something they've arrived to, how they execute the motivation,
Yeah.
I think is what he's saying is the intelligence part. What's the best way I can,
Yeah.
what's the best, what's the best way that I can do X without the, having generated its own motivation,
Yeah.
and so.
Yeah. Well, and that was the thing that frustrated me a little bit, was that sort of, I guess, maybe that moment of initial the initial spark of life, right? That, that this idea that there, that because people like Elon have said, well, I want Grok to be maximally truth seeking. Well, it's like, okay, what does that even mean? And that sort of, but that sort of assumes or implies that a whole cascade of different kind of deeper and deeper and deeper philosophical commitments that that if you're going to give a general instruction to an AGI, for example, if an AGI would even take instructions from us, and say, okay, this is what we're most interested in, you go figure it out. Then I think it's important, it makes sense to sort of examine all of those kind of nested levels of choices that we just kind of take for granted.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he's more worried about the places like Facebook letting control go in cases like Myanmar,
Mhm.
where, hey, we're making the outrage and the clicks are making us money, even though we have no idea what the outrage or the clicks are.
Mhm.
We can't speak the language.
Yeah,
And even when we do throw resources at it, it's for people,
yeah,
and then we're going to brush it under the rug. So then the question is how if you're going to act that way when times are simple, what happens when you get more advanced AIs
and there's higher stakes. Yeah.
and there's much higher stakes, which is kind of where he's seems to slowly be building to. I'm only into chapter 9, I think, at the
Mhm.
moment.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but it's kind of like when things are getting harder and harder to control and do these things with, and we seem to be. I think you guys talked last week about memes and Dawkins a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, but some of that too is kind of like because I was thinking too the when culture becomes part of the meme space as much as anything else, which I hadn't really thought about. Like, what happens when it's more about the culture is the issue,
Hmm.
which is kind of weird when you think about the culture wars. Um, but it's if the culture wars went out, then it would seem to be that yes, the kind of the meme space is more important than the genetic space
Hmm.
in a weird way.
Yeah.
And what does that look like? And then the culture wars have really done something if that's where you're worried. And because your your genes get pushed forward based on the culture you live in,
Hmm.
which and if you're looking back at both industrialization and colonization, I'm curious what the genetics of that broader space looks like for the colonizing cultures,
Hmm.
and is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah.
Um, but that and that's even going beyond the questions that he's raising.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe part of the issue or part of the problem that I'm having is that he seems to kind of be straddling this, maybe the singularity, right? He's got sort of one foot in, the present or the recent past, and and he's imagining, kind of what's on the other side. Because when he's talking about, I mean, because the thing that I had just brought up, right? The question of bots and whether or not they're actually, sort of self-actualizing, or whether they're just sort of amplifying the agendas of the people who deployed them, that would be, kind of a pre-singularity thing. Similarly, maybe, when he talks about surveillance, I was thinking, well, okay, I've read a lot of this in Shoshana Zuboff, but what she was very clearly talking about pre-singularity, pre-AI, algorithm, and it's a slippery slope. When do algorithms become AI? And I don't feel like I'm getting a clear sense of where he thinks that change happens.
I don't
Yeah.
think he's even getting. I mean, I don't think he's even really. Yeah, I'm not actually seeing much of anything in here where he even is suggesting necessarily that an actual conscious, you know, AI.
Hmm. Yeah.
He
No,
barely
I'm
raises
not
that,
saying
and
that.
I
I
mean,
was sort of
eventually, yeah,
exaggerating when I
yeah,
said singularity. Yeah, but
yeah, I
I mean,
know,
even agentic AI.
yeah, but agentic AI, if we want to call it that, it's just another, it's just another algorithm. It's another bot. It's another thing that we have said, okay, do this. That's the whole point of agentic. If I just told you, do a task and figure out how to implement it.
Right, but
So
it's multi-step and it's semi-autonomous and it uses the outputs of one
sure,
thing to input into the next state, the next step and all of that,
yeah,
which
I'm not
was
saying it's not nothing, yeah, but
yeah, which was something that is, I mean, that I think is arguably along the way to either AI or, I mean, I don't honestly, I don't 100% believe that we're going to get,
yeah.
general purpose, AGI,
I,
real,
well, I don't think we're going to get it from large language models.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
dead end. But yeah,
It'll seem like magic, and it'll seem like magic for a long time.
Well,
But the question is,
yeah.
does it? There are already people making arguments that kids going to AI and asking the question are kind of dumbing them down and destroying you know, their ability to think
yeah.
Mhm.
kind of both creatively as well as,
Oh, it's definitely dumbing down the kids. It may actually also be dumbing down the AI because it gets,
yeah,
because it gets the reinforcement that that was an adequate answer.
and it's a weird thing, but eh, for for and it may be changing slowly now because the economics of the industry are different and weird and streaming is becoming a thing, but it used to be the case that screenwriting word for word was the most lucrative writing you could do
Hmm.
on planet Earth, and you
Yeah.
get paid stupid amounts of money for writing 120 pages of screenplay, and the average screenplay level of reading was really fourth grade level.
Yeah.
Like you're not finding really deep, rich
Right. It's been a long time
word
since Faulkner was writing
verbiage and
screenplays.
crazy in screenplays. So, and that's what's going out and somewhat educating, but also entertaining Harry and Mary Beer Can.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, but
Yeah.
when you think about that applied to AI and the kind of the dumbing down of the masses,
Hmm.
I worry that it becomes a race to the bottom.
Hmm.
The other problem too is an AI with the kind of caveman conceptualization of the average 4 or 5 year old, or even if you go up to third grade, the lack of thought that they can have, but they work more on emotion than they do on anything else.
Hmm.
If and and in some sense, we do know what a leader with a fourth grade education
Can do.
now can
Yeah.
do in the world when you give them power.
Yep.
Um, or you have somebody who's leading us, quote unquote, scare
Hmm.
quotes,
Yeah.
um, but and is taking input from outsiders,
Yeah.
but still doing all of the grunt lead work.
Right.
Um,
And as if to emphasize that point, I saw a clip from the YouTube news, I think yesterday, that Kim Jong-un went to the DMZ and shook hands with the president of South Korea and sort of extended kind of a welcome, which was very statesmanlike relative to kind of what's going on at the top of our government.
I mean, but back though to the whole, book, AI making people
Sorry.
stupid.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, I will counterpoint to that. Every time some new some new technology, and this is, I think, one of the real stories of the book here. It's like, books were going to make people, writing was going to make people stupid because they weren't memorizing the stories.
Right.
Yeah.
We managed to
Saw
get
it, yeah.
past that. Yeah. So that's
Right,
where
I
I'm
agree. And
with that.
Wikipedia was going to make people stupid, and yeah.
Yeah, but again, all the way back to, writing was going to make people stupid because they couldn't memorize. They weren't just going to memorize the stories themselves and be able to do that in a creative way. And then on, and books again. And, I mean, again, one of the main suggestions he's got here, putting it in a slightly different way, is that maybe books have, imprisoned people's minds. The book where you write down this absolutely static story, and it could be, the Talmud,
Right. Yeah.
what
Well,
you write,
and certainly the hierarchy of who's authorized, who can write, and who must read, kind of thing.
yeah. But
Yeah,
but also everybody has to follow. This is the truth,
Yeah.
as opposed to when we had a more fluid relationship maybe with reality. I don't know, but I'm just saying that this, the new technology is making people stupid. I think it is. I mean, I think at the same time we can say the new technology has always changed how we think. And whether or not stupider or not, I don't know. I mean, but again, I love, I think differently as somebody who reads tons of books than somebody who has memorized a Shakespeare play or the complete works of Shakespeare or memorized the Bible. I have because I can't remember crap. I don't remember what's in this book. I just had to, I just read it, and I'm not talking word for word. I had to go, oh, which chapter was? Oh yeah, that idea. I mean, I spent 20 minutes doing that right before the call, sort of flipping through. Oh, that thing. Yeah. Because my brain is completely.
Yeah, I did too. I reviewed.
Well, I over my little vacation, I went back and started rereading from the beginning.
Mhm.
So I had been listened to the audiobook up to about chapter 6 just to get a flavor of what's going on, and then I was reading along with us chapter by chapter, and then I went back last, Friday and started back at the beginning, and it was almost like a whole new book. It was
Yeah.
like I remember these things, but wow, like there's so much I didn't remember. But it's also it's very dense, and in looking at his index, both his index and his bibliography, a lot of the stuff he's quoting, I mean, there's a fair amount of stuff where he's quoting original research papers to get things, but he's also, he, like us, I think, is fairly broadly read and popular.
Yeah.
He's reading Jared Diamond, he's reading, Steven Pinker.
Yeah.
So he's kind of summarizing a lot of what popular modern, nonfiction is over the last 20, 30 years.
He summarizes himself too. He's like, quote from quote from Sapiens. Yeah.
Right.
So there's a lot of density here, and you almost do need to read it in kind of an Adlerian sense to really. You can read each one as an individual essay,
right?
But then all these essays are building to in a way that a lot of the books we've read are not as dense and going somewhere. It's about as close to Wengrow and Graeber as anything else we've read along the way.
Yeah. Well, I do think that he, and sort of he begins chapter 7, right, with this idea, kind of sort of what you were just saying, Will, about, about AI in general, specifically about surveillance, right? That, that surveillance is with us, and it has, it has these two elements. It has this light side, where we get security, support, essential goods, and it has this dark side where we get, more control and all of that. And so I think that's. I mean, I think that's a good point. I'm willing to take that point, and also to extend it, to the whole issue of, of automated, computerized systems, including AI, to whatever extent, he wants to talk about it. One of the things, actually, though, to get back to this, this idea that, that maybe AI is, as an assistive technology, is making us more dependent on it, and, and more vulnerable if it, if we lose access to it, or if the access is controlled in some way. But the thing that I was thinking along as I was reading that was, does good enough sort of kill great in AI training as well, right? If we have these, because measuring it by sort of what the general public, what average users experience and how they feel about it is not necessarily, a real way of kind of judging the quality of the actual thing. And so, everybody was super impressed with, ChatGPT 4.0, but, was it really that great, or was it, did it just seem, very, magical and, and Turing testy?
Did it seem magical to people who were looking for magic?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Did it seem conscious to people who were looking for consciousness?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Well,
go ahead.
he does. I do appreciate the fact that he kind of has a slightly different, and we may have talked about this, 2 or 3 weeks back, but he actually has a reasonably interesting definition of consciousness versus thinking.
Right.
And he separates the two, whereas a lot of authors over the last 40 or 50 years, because I think I mentioned that I had reread Erwin Schrödinger's book on kind of thinking and biology and consciousness. And he didn't split it out so much, but that was more also a précis on where the state of biology was in the mid 50s.
Right. Yeah, I've noted that a couple times as you've mentioned it, and as as it's kind of come up in our discussions, to go back to reading it. And then there was another thing. There was that 1972 thing that he talks about along the way. Why computers are never gonna do anything. And I thought, well, okay, let's go back to that and see, because if it's just, what I'm curious in that context is there an argument about, sort of the quality of thought, or is it just a raw, brute force cycles? They'll never be able to spin enough cycles in order to approximate this thing. And does and given that we don't, that we can't really ever know for sure whether anybody outside of our own minds is conscious, is that, he meant, and Harari mentions that as well. But is that, is our lack of ability really relevant in that
There's a
kind of assessment?
You bring up quality, and so again, I think there's quality in audience, as you said, and obviously, if you want, if the quality you're looking for isn't just, sort of going back to the are they looking for magic? More like, if you're looking for a sympathetic ear that tells you what you want to hear, that's the audience for that, and the quality is great. You've got people who are falling in love with ChatGPT. And similarly, if what you're looking for, Claude Code is awesome. It really is. Obviously, it's there's a lot of, it's great for making demos. So if what you want to do is make a demo, it is magical. And it really is. If you're starting from scratch, whatever, and you've got an idea, you can get something up and running quick and fast, basically just by telling it to do so. So that quality and also the audience for it of, oh, I have this corpus of code that everybody else in the world has done, and it's scraped from Stack Overflow and some public open source repos,
Yeah.
and it can do with that pretty well. But there's that. You know, I think that quality is what you're looking into it. If what you're looking for, I think again, quality isn't really in the eye of the beholder, because if what you're looking for is what's wrong with this,
Yeah. Yeah.
why
Well,
is this? I mean, or even like there's this new. There's I was just listening about Shy Girl.
mhm.
That it was getting great reviews. It got published in the UK. People were thinking, "Oh, this is awesome! It's terrific!" And somebody who was looking for something to be bad about it
Yeah.
dug into it and said, "No, we think this was written by AI, and it's been pulled back."
Uh-huh.
I don't know whether it was written by AI or not. Maybe it was, but people really liked it.
Yeah.
And romance, and then again, there are a bunch of romance writers who are open about, hey, we use AI,
Mhm.
to do, I'll clean it up a little bit, but yeah. So,
Right. Well, and how different is that from, oh, we use the story grid, you know, we plug in, we plug in this formula, and but I guess as you were talking, when you said, and my immediate reaction when you said Claude is great at coding is, well, okay, that coding is the map, not the territory, right? So that's the thing that I would expect of this type of automation and this type of machine intelligence. But it would be great at the map. It would master the map. But the gap between the map and the territory is, I think, where kind of the humanity is. I mean, and an analogy might be, sort of all these people who I mean, especially years ago, but I think even still to this day, somewhat, would say that, that analog audio is different from, from compressed digital audio or even uncompressed digital audio. And that,
makes it better.
and well, and
It makes it better.
well, that's the thing, and Creative Labs was putting vacuum tubes on cards for a while and shit like that.
Yeah.
It was absurd, but it was meeting that market. But then, yeah. So the difference is, yeah, what makes it better? The difference is sort of
Who
indefinable.
says it's better?
The difference is indefinable. Well, a lot of people say it's better.
People say all sorts of crap.
Okay, but wait a minute. But that and I'm with you exactly. But I mean, and my observation there is, sort of the onus is on the objector to sort of prove that there is something there in their objection, but and I think that's legitimate. I think the onus should be on the person who says, well, it's not the same, to explain how it's not the same. But that difficulty of sort of defining how it's not the same doesn't mean that it's not the same. And I think that there's a and I'm not looking for a God of the gaps, but I think there is a gap there. And I
So
think
to take it down a level from where you're at, and it may clarify things, it may muddy them up, but your discussion of the map and the territory with respect to the space of coding, the step before that, you can look at, the old saw of the, million monkeys at a million typewriters typing for a million years. Sooner or later, they're gonna type out Shakespeare because they only have. So you've got a map. There's a map of the 26 characters and what the monkeys are gonna type.
mhm.
And then you have the actual territory of the entirety of everything they could produce, and you're going to pinpoint some level of creativity and new some phase of newness, and we've never done this before kind of space, and it takes in some sense a consciousness, some sense of humanity to judge, amongst all the gobbledygook that the monkeys are going to generate in the time they do that, which is you can look at as a not so intelligent AI or version of AI.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, you're right. It takes the person to know which one of those bazillion things that the monkeys come up with is Shakespeare.
but and what's confounding, I think, in that as you go along at those levels are these what does he call them? The intersubjective realities or intersubjective entities,
Mhm.
which we all and I think it's interesting too to look back at the knowing what we know with um Pinker
Mhm.
is we all have kind of trapped ourselves in to tie this concretely down to chapter 7 that we're checking in with this week.
Mhm.
Theoretically.
It's broadly, I think this chapter is broadly kind of the what happens when you're surveilled
Yeah.
from easy levels to very hard levels,
Mhm.
which totalitarian states
Yeah.
had and what they were able to accomplish up to 20 or 30 years ago into the 80s before the Soviet Union collapsed.
Mhm.
And some of that area overlapped with computers. So what can we do? So you can do an awful lot of surveillance up to that point. But the thing that has changed now is we have computerized and amplified the amount of surveillance we're doing,
Yeah.
which is, and most of the things that have been done with surveillance thus far have been very benign and not super painful.
Yeah.
But what happens when that surveillance becomes horribly bad?
Mhm.
Like if you're in America and suddenly America overnight switches into China with the same level of surveillance and it's like you're plugged into the matrix now and it's very hard to unplug
Mhm.
if you want to get away from all that surveillance.
Mhm.
And the amount of data they've got to sift through to figure out who's doing good things and bad things. Ideally now you think, hey, and I don't think he gets into it to the level that I think Shoshana Zuboff and a few others have. Um, if you can look at massive amounts of data at the level that Facebook and some of the social media platforms have extracted, it's targeting very specific bits of data. So if you're China and you have massive amounts of data to look at and you're looking for the spies inside, being able to track where someone has gone,
Mhm.
you can track hotel stays, international visits, and even if you can't see who they are, you can just see that they've traveled.
Mhm.
You can create profiles of people to narrow down the 50 people you really need to watch
Right.
to figure out which one of the 50 is a spy. And that kind of data really helps you out. Or even things like there are instances of Strava data
Yeah.
exfiltrations
Yeah.
that you can sit and look and like, oh, there's at the same time every day, some guy is running around in the same track.
Yeah.
And oh, wait, look, that data has been extracted near a military base.
Mhm.
So we know this guy probably works on the military base. We know where he's going. We know that he works there. Now if we can get into and kidnap or take him,
Mhm.
you can, then torture the extra data out of him that you really need.
Right.
But those types of weird little anomalous bits of data are
Mhm.
super hard for an individual to find.
Yeah.
But if
I think
you've aggregated them and created something that can then filter them,
Mhm.
now you're in real trouble.
Yeah.
Um,
I think there's a place that I think that actually that the surveillance thing gets to something which he doesn't get into too much, but which and I think is kind of going through our whole quality discussion. So, I mean, what is the what is effective, what's the difference between what AI does, why AI quality is lame versus humanity, human qualities. And we can go from, I think we can go all the way back into the Industrial Revolution for this of like, oh, isn't, we now will fetishize a handmade piece
Right.
of cloth,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Whereas when machine loomed cloth came out, it was like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's way better than
Consistent
that crappy
quality.
hand
Yeah.
loomed stuff.
Right.
Bread, Wonder Bread was Wonder Bread. That
Right.
was amazing, so much better than that crap you'd bake yourself. This is
And McDonald's made international travelers feel safe. Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
and but so let's get into, and and the thing that we in the literature space, and the art space or whatever, what we value about that, what I find valuable about that is, the connection with an actual human being there, which I don't.
Mhm.
And whereas, again, in the romance, in the romance scene, that oh, it's following the traditional pattern. Great, that's perfect. That's what I just want to,
Right.
consume this because it's giving me what I want. And
Mhm.
then we can go all that back to surveillance
Yeah.
and good, humans, the surveillance of a human being, the surveillance of the guy from Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy or whatever, or okay, did you guys see the piece in the Times over the last couple of days about the reporter who believes he's figured out who Satoshi, the Bitcoin founder, was?
Oh
Okay,
no, I haven't seen that.
yeah, this guy, and it all starts with he is watching a documentary where, and this HBO documentary that says that somebody else, this other guy, we think it's him,
Mhm.
and he's looking at this one, but one of the guys who's being interviewed, he said, "I had a gut feeling. I thought that guy was hiding something,
Hmm.
not the actual person there." And then he uses that, and going on through, or because we can't, we can look at behavior.
Mhm.
We can look at those big patterns of behavior and everything. Okay, this guy fits all the criteria because the Strava, this we North Korea can do. But what we may be getting out of that is, okay, well, somebody happened to fit all these criteria, but maybe he's we're in North Korea or whatever, and this guy, he actually went to all these various places, did all these sorts of things, and maybe in his heart he thinks that Kim Jong Un is the best person in the universe and really supports everything. He just had bad coincidences, and when he's getting tortured to death, Kim Jong Un has just lost, somebody who's actually fundamentally incredibly loyal to him.
Mhm.
Going to be a different situation from that really careful one-on-one human surveillance
Yeah.
of getting to know, like, again, you see in spy movies where they get to really know each other. You figure out what's really in their head somehow or other.
Yeah.
Their personal
Yeah.
connection.
Yeah.
Well,
And
but even in those cases, you have to rely on the human intelligence on the ground, putting
yeah,
the pieces together,
Mhm.
and almost always there's the fallibility of, hey, did they get the right person at the right place and at the right time?
Yeah.
well,
Or
there,
was
by
it
the way,
just,
is
oh,
one of
you might be the one I'm looking for, so I'm going to kill you,
Right.
and you're
which, but that's
done.
exactly and that's there's chapter 8 right there.
Yeah.
The network is often wrong.
Right. Right. And we and the and that
Validated.
the CIA, the former director of the CIA and NSA, we kill people based on metadata. And I think that's still chapter 7. Yeah. So there are real world, kind of consequences before we get to this other thing.
Well, the one thing that strikes me too, while we're looking at this, the surveillance and the example of the guy who quits clapping first.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, Part of the pain of that story is that you're testing the wrong things, because that
Yeah.
guy may have been the biggest fan of Stalin,
Right.
Yeah.
to go back to your reference.
Yeah.
But the part of the issue, and I think where he is kind of going, is the intersubjective reality that we choose to live by,
Mhm.
is that when you're in that surveillance state, to some extent, you're choosing to live within that surveillance state.
Mhm.
So the Russian people for a long time could decide, you know what, this is not working for us. We need to just rise up again and wipe the slate clean and start over somehow.
Yeah.
In the feeling enough pain to change your intersubjective reality is part of the problem. So you have to get if you think about it as chemical reactions, you have to get enough energy into the system to have the reaction happen, and then
Start, yeah.
the overall level of energy, even either to keep the reaction going or the final reactants, then drops down dramatically. So the question is, how are people when they still at least have the ability to make those choices? And tomorrow will be a good example in the Hungarian elections with Viktor Orban. He's been there 20 plus years. He's dramatically changed the shape. And I have now probably seen the phrase illiberal democracy 20 times in the last 2 months. And
And that's his phrase.
I'm seeing it more and more.
Yeah.
And a lot of people raising the alarm bells that, oh, wait, maybe it's not democracy that we're worried about, but it's going from a liberal democracy to an illiberal democracy, which to some
Well,
extent,
that's an improvement of the conversation.
it scales it down and focuses it more, because that's the steps we're taking are kind of hurting the broader democracy, but they're hurting. And in some sense, we're already living in an illiberal democracy because we have a hierarchy of people with money and means who are viewed in society as bigger or better than those who are sidelined and haven't been. So,
Right.
if you're a black female trans person in America who's an orphan, let's say, that confluence of tags on your personhood put you as about as low on the totem pole in American culture as you could possibly be, versus you know super rich cisgender white guy who inherited $1 billion from his father,
Right.
and you're white Anglo-Saxon Protestant on top of it.
Right.
That's the pinnacle.
That's the lottery win. Yeah.
And everywhere in between is the scala naturae
Yeah.
of human existence. We're not even, it's like we're not even Aristotle anymore. We're not including the creatures and the bugs and the plants and the animals in this picture
Well, and
anymore.
oftentimes we're not including a whole host of descriptors like what you just used for your victim, person. We're just talking about one, and we're sort of identifying people with just one of their characteristics. Yeah, and I think that I felt somewhere along the way, I haven't found that, haven't gotten to that highlight in that note that I made. I think it was in chapter 8 or 9, but along those lines too, I mean, choosing the right thing, kind of, and I do think that talking about liberal versus illiberal democracies is a kind of an expansion or an improvement of that, or maybe not an expansion, but a narrowing improvement, kind of a specificity element of that conversation that improves it. He also makes the point along the way that he says at one point, people should instead worry about the smartphones on which they read these conspiracy theories, right? So kind of focusing on the one thing and not being the frogs in the water as it begins to boil is I think a big element too.
Yeah.
I remember stories too and it dawned on me while I was watching the video from last week. There were some discussions that made me think we should try reading Noam Chomsky's Manufactured Consent and compare what it was for its time versus what's missing now.
Yeah.
Because in some sense and it's not really AI, but it's the algorithms that are kind of chasing us down the crazy rat holes on either side of the political spectrum, and radicalizing us to the extremes rather than, the newspapers and magazines and general media were kind of in their own way attempting to bring us to some kind of happy middle.
Yeah.
And since the beginning of social media, everyone seems to be way more to the extremes as a result of
and it went, because the incentive, the economic incentive in the old media was to find that middle, and now the economic incentive is to find those, those niches.
I don't know if that's necessarily. I mean, I think we were. Yeah. Again, you look at, and I think we might have even talked. Did we talk about this last week? I forget. But I mean, the pre-World War II, you had very partisan. There were two. Most places, most big cities had two big newspapers that were on very different sides of things.
Yeah.
For until and going back to the beginning of American newspapers, you'd have very strong, very
Right. Right. We
very,
did talk about that a little.
very,
Yeah.
very angry differences. I mean, remember you had some guy cane a guy half to death on the House floor, the
Right.
Senate floor in the
Yeah.
1850s because
Yeah.
he said slavery was bad.
Right.
And we did the Hearst papers. I think it was the Hearst papers that got us into the Spanish-American War.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. I think that model didn't. That model was very, very polarizing. I
and
think.
it sort of ended roughly when we all got a comment, "Oh my gosh, we're scared to death of the commies."
Well, it also ended when we got TV.
Yeah.
So after 1939, right? Then then there were only three networks, and they were all competing for the same market, and I think that's when we get much more of an incentive.
They also had the equal time.
Right.
They had the equal time thing was a
They had the equal
big
time thing, and so it was natural. It was a natural incentive to kind of try to find that middle, and try to seem above the partisanship, while still maybe being kind of secretly partisan. Along,
You're muted, Chris.
you're muted, Chris.
Now the issue is we're giving equal time to QAnon, which is just, crazy pants. I mean, not even equal time. We're giving like excessive time because once you start down watching one video on QAnon, you're gonna get more.
Oh, absolutely, because you engage with it. Yeah. Yeah.
You become radicalized because the algorithm is going to make money off of you for doing that.
Well, and by the way, you guys have heard of AI psychosis.
Yeah.
Where it's again the algorithm, chat GPT or whatever, it's again just an algorithm telling you what you want to hear, and it's saying, oh, you're gonna so people drive their own rabbit hole, just by talking to
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because that was the first thing that I noticed about ChatGPT was how obsequious it was. And but again, Chris, what you're talking about, with the sort of, okay, now QAnon is part of this potential conversation. He sort of talks about that in the context of this at the end of this surveillance chapter, right? When he's saying, it's the users themselves, when he's talking about TripAdvisor, right? It's the users themselves rather than some sophisticated AI algorithm who determine whether a restaurant's worth visiting. People who ate the restaurant can score it to 1 to 5, yada, yada, yada. The TripAdvisor algorithm merely aggregates the data, calculates the restaurant's average score, ranks the restaurant compared to others of its kind, and makes the results available for everybody to see. Well, and he's and my sense of that was he's presenting that as, this is on the edge of being a major problem. And and I think that kind of highlights the issue that we've had, in our, especially in new media, as it's sort of commenting on itself and its role relative, sort of vis-a-vis the original, traditional media, where, how and where to place these edges, these guardrails.
He does go later into talking about, sort of, because he does get prescriptive in the later chapters.
Yeah.
Here's some options, and one of them that I really liked a lot was because he's talking about, the algorithmic transparency of algorithms, transparency in general, the transparency of algorithms.
Oh, is it in his five?
Yeah,
five things he wants. Yeah.
I think pretty much. I don't remember if it was 5 or not, but it's late. Again, I just re-looked over it. And that, I mean, that the transparency, and he gives that direct, and again, this is a little bit later. I don't, where he's talking about sort of, algorithm, why did you, the whole process of why did you get rejected for your loan?
Yeah.
And it's all this big thing.
I love that section. Yeah.
I love that section.
Yeah.
And that reminded me actually something of specific, that when I took history, philosophy of science in 1990, whatever the heck it was, one of the very first things that was sort of put out there was, maybe not the first thing, but are you should be able to describe pretty much any concept. If you're not able to describe pretty much any concept to a bright middle schooler,
Mm-hmm.
you don't really understand it yourself.
Yeah.
And that sort of middle, and again, I remember, having to, describe. I think the midterm or the final was, describe the, Einstein's relativity
Mm-hmm.
to,
Yeah.
in a way that a bright middle schooler would get it. I mean, you got to, a few, to do it in a few pages and it's, do it there.
Yeah.
And I think that, there is part of me wants to think that there's very little in this world that,
Mm-hmm.
if you can't boil something down to something that a bright middle schooler, and you'd have to maybe give a little time,
Yeah.
can understand it. Is it something does anybody really understand it, or is it just something for itself?
Yeah.
Is it the not impenetrable, not even the word that he uses, opaque?
Yeah.
If there's that level of opacity to an idea,
Yep.
that you just can't, it can't really be explained.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Is it an idea?
Right.
I mean, is it real?
Well, and I was like the first thing on my list, and as I was making a list of things that I wanted to kind of make sure we hit, was that idea of the idea that I think he does a really good job explaining of the sort of multivariate analysis versus, reason and having a reason for things,
or at least multiple reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do multivariate, but again, you can, it is still possible with multivariate analysis. I've done multivariate analysis.
Mm-hmm.
It is, you can explain it, but
right. Well, he doesn't say, and he doesn't use the term multivariate.
I know, but it is exactly what he's described.
Yeah. And that, and so actually, I mean, that would be something that'd be great to teach, middle schoolers and high school kids and college kids about, is the, this idea of, of decision matrices and weighted elements of a decision tree or chain and all that kind of stuff, and but at least, I mean, at the very least, this idea that the mortgage assessment isn't it, your score isn't based on any one particular thing, of course, and the other point that he makes, I think, is valid too, that that then maybe you do need a human to sort of sometimes override that decision. Okay, well, those are, I mean, because it's, I mean, maybe I'm overusing the terms quantitative and qualitative, but, but there's, in my mind right now, the qualitative thing is, the ability to sort of move the sliders of the prioritization of each of those elements of the decision, and, and to kind of decide which one of them you're going to focus on.
Well, we need to get the human element, and that's the human. Maybe fundamentally part of the human element is limiting things to some things that we can understand, which another part of me is like, I kind of dislike, because,
well, yeah,
if you limit things to what we can understand, again, I'm a believer.
Well, you're definitely standing in the way of progress, right? Because that's one of the miracles of Amazon, right? Is that they found the correlations that nobody would have guessed, right? And we're able to sort of take advantage of those.
But the difference, though, is that they're not letting their data sets out for people to see. So, it's the same thing as, every healthcare insurance company keeps a ton of data on us as individuals,
right?
But we don't ever get to see it to know. You may see little bits and pieces because you see your individual doctor, who then tries to, look at the entrails of the animal to figure out, okay, what is your fate?
Yep.
And you hope the doctor gets it right, but these days, you got to worry that some doctors are the wrong kind of doctors, and they're not actually using the statistics and the actual medicine.
Yep.
And I'm waiting to really see physicians be kicked out of the group, because there is a standard of care, and there are some physicians who are going radically outside of the broader standard of care.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know,
I was up in Bemidji this week, and talking with my ex, and she works at a hospital, and she said that the doctors there were recently told that when they do colonoscopies, they're not taking enough samples. And of course the surgeon's immediate reaction to that was, I know what to sample, but the corporation is coming down on them and saying, no, take more, and you need to get your number up, so they're going to end up, taking, they're going to end up sampling things that are obviously not problematic, benign polyps, or even just, kind of healthy tissue, just to get their number up, which for me invalidates the whole idea of ever having a colonoscopy again.
yeah. Well, I mean, or if you get more samples, you're going to have more likelihood to find, you're also going to have a higher likelihood of finding false negatives, which becomes an issue too.
Well, so that you get a more billable thing.
That's the thing. That's the motivation. Is they bill by by the number.
Or even goes, but I don't think there's an impenetrability to going back to your Amazon advice. I don't think there's anything impenetrable. I don't think there's. If you are on the inside of the Amazon decision-making process, I'm sure they're perfectly comfortable. They know exactly what it's not that hard.
Mm-hmm.
It really isn't figuring out, oh, this got lots of clicks, so we'll give it people, again, it's, the main thing they're driving towards, however, is how can they maximize profits for themselves, as opposed to the people that they're, as opposed to the sellers who are not using their fulfillment centers or whatever.
Yeah.
So again, the actual impenetrability. I mean, or even there's another example he gives of the sentencing thing. And what was obscene about the sentencing example was it was copyrighted in secret. It's like it probably wasn't that complicated, honestly.
Right.
But they weren't allowed to know how the decision was made to recommend this sentencing.
Yeah.
Because this is a copy, and that gets again. I think when you actually look at most algorithms, they're not that complicated, but the people are trying to make them. It's the trade secrets. If you couldn't understand the algorithm, they wouldn't need it to be a trade secret.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of somebody brought up the example today of judges and sentencing, and when they tend to be lighter, harsher in their sentencing requirements. And, if you get sentenced by a judge after lunch, you're more likely to get an easy sentence than otherwise.
Yeah.
So if you're but the problem is having the aggregate data to look at, to know that, so that if you're an attorney for defendants, you want to try and force the decision to be after lunch to go in favor.
Right.
And there are cases like this where there's weird biases like this, or even racial bias that happens.
Yeah.
And I always wonder if it shouldn't be the case that in some of those instances that there is a probabilistic dice rolling thing that should act as a filter even after the human decision that says, make the sentence lighter or harsher just by pure chance.
Yeah.
To wash out that bias.
Yeah.
But doing that is horrible, but you should be able to at least say, there are places where algorithms can look at that stuff and say, yes, this one judge is at the far left of the bell curve for sentencing, and this judge is at the far right. So we need to
minimize those tail events,
filter those tails to be more towards the middle to make the whole system a little fairer.
Yeah.
Because the system we have
process
for you can always you can go up to the Supreme Court to have things reviewed, but
Mhm.
generally they're not reviewing it to the level of kind of fixing those levels of things.
Mhm.
And it occurs to me one of the big ideas he makes here, and I think it was back in the religion chapter, is the Bible doesn't have a mechanism for revising
Oh,
itself,
correction.
And
but the Constitution does.
yeah.
In a lot of these everyday decisions for things like judges and sentencing, we have no filter for helping to actively make those better.
Mhm.
It's just who's the judge you get at the time you get it, and that piece is done by random chance generally. But the bigger issue is the the color and the socioeconomics of the judges who are on the bench don't match up at all with the vast majority of people that they're seeing in front of them, unless you're a judge for, the SE that's looking at SEC cases, and
Mhm.
you need very specialized knowledge to be able to pull that off.
Yeah.
And even now we're, because of the way the federal bench is appointed by a president who may or may not have any, knowledge of anything, like,
But
we're we're now appointing
with the
judges who
approval of the
just
Congress.
the we at least had and used the filter of attorneys kind of voting on and saying, here's a level of A to Z of whether we should be appointing a judge or not, and you need this minimum level of experience
Mhm.
and this, so there was a mechanism, and we've thrown
Or at
that
least there was a
mechanism
hope that
out.
people would be vetted before they were even on
Yeah.
a list to be
Yeah.
chosen.
Again, there does continue to be a mechanism. You can still so-called blue slip a judge, at the Senate actually, approves every judge.
Mhm.
And
But that's a political thing too. So
yeah, it
that
is.
filter is not
Politics and
working for
democracy
us.
is how we
It's
work.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
There is no objective truth of what. Okay, so an example that I find interesting when we're going back to judges, that again we were just talking about baseball at the beginning and the new ABS
yeah,
system. Yeah, where what was interesting about that to me is that actually most of the time, there are occasionally there was like a bad, there was one umpire, like last week who like got overturned 20 times in a single game. But most of the time, it's barely, you only get two challenges. You keep getting them if you win, but it's about 50-50 whether or not you're going to win. So most of the time, the umpires are actually doing it right, but there is a self-correction
Mhm.
system in there of, okay, well, you can, if you think it was bad, you can do an appeal, and you
Mhm.
may lose the appeal, but it's a little more thing.
Right.
So there's that that example of
That's a
uh,
good example. Yeah, because there's a
of,
penalty for bearing false witness or whatever. Yeah.
yeah,
well, I know.
you run out of options to review. Yeah.
Well, when I look at it too, there's kind of two things going on. The ABS system, in some sense, is designed to get rid of the really dumb calls that the umpire probably just did not see and made a call because they have to make a call.
Mhm.
And if it was super obvious, it gets kicked out. But at the same time, you got to think that the umpires union really wanted to limit how much this could be used because we now have the ability with cameras and all the digital stuff that it could be a perfect strike or ball each and every time because you have all the data in the camera and you could see it
You
all.
can
So
replace the appeal. Yeah.
why do you need that umpire anyway
Well, they did.
to
They
call
did
the balls
actually.
and the
Well, there's
strikes?
an
And
interesting. Go ahead.
they
Sorry.
did a quick review also of that because actually the umpires union was not against the ABS system during the planning, implementation, everything.
Yeah.
But because one thing that was found by the ABS system, by sort of review of the ABS data when it was in the minors and everything, was there were sort of the the variance of accuracy between good umpires and meh umpires was the good umpires were about 98% accurate,
Hmm.
and the meh umpires were about 94% accurate.
Wow, that's still pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, and Harari actually kind of almost addresses that sort of thing when he talks about, there are certainly, machines can move faster than humans, but we still have, track and field, because we like watching humans. And so, so that I thought that was kind of an interesting moment that, of
and that gets us back, human, LLMs can write terrific romance novels if
Right.
what you want is that kind of romance novel.
Right.
But
and can play chess, but we like watching Magnus Carlsen.
To take the ABS system and kind of move us into the network isn't always right, and miscommunication. I'll use this example that happened, I think yesterday as a bridge, may have been the day before. But the Dodgers were playing. Shohei Ohtani is on the mound. First pitch of the game, he throws it. It's a little low and gets called a ball. And after his throw, he puts his hand back to adjust his hat.
Oh, and it was like
which then becomes a signal to the catcher, and the catcher immediately taps his head to indicate, I want to challenge this pitch. It turns out the pitch was low. It was a ball, but it was a miscommunication between the catcher and the pitcher. And what's weird too is the amount of time that you have to like challenge these things.
2 seconds.
Is pretty short. So Ohtani adjusting his hat on his head becomes a signal to the catcher, challenge it.
He blew one of his challenges accidentally.
So literally on the first pitch of the game, and I think it's probably, if I'm not mistaken, it's probably the first time this kind of weird miscommunication has happened to trigger this.
Yeah.
And assuredly it'll happen again, and we'll see other kind of weird things too, because
Ohtani could have called for it himself, and maybe the real miscommunication here was the catcher thinking he had to do it, because Ohtani could do again himself, and just that's how you call for it.
Well, it's a good thing it's not the third base coach, because the third base coach is down there touching and itching everything.
I think, by the way, the main question, the main. I was just reading about this. The main constraint that the umpires union had on it was short time limit, and it can only be the three. It can only be pitcher, catcher, or hitter. Anyway,
but it's those kind of things are quirky because we have the ability to reduce that cognitive load, and the question is, for the 94 to 98% space, is it worth it? To make that? And the problem is we don't know that there may be some other emergent behavior that happens when you let some other thing do it. Whereas baseball's been going 100 years. We know exactly how it works, more or less. And it's okay. If you want to get some weird call. But I also know too, from experience in scoring baseball games, the more you try to follow and track and put into data what's going on the field, it focuses your attention on what's happening in the game, and sometimes can deepen your love of what is happening. But if you're getting down to the level of like balls and strikes for everything, it's super duper hard to score it and pay attention and catch everything and annotate it all down all at the same time.
And what counts as an error? Sometimes there's a subjective question about what counts as an error. But even back to the number situation, again, it's just batting average barely matters anymore. It's OPS. The classic. This guy has got a great batting average, but you got balls in the play, or what? You got balls in the play, but that doesn't reflect, did you get on base? It doesn't reflect, did you score? It doesn't reflect, did you do a sacrifice fly or whatever. And so batting average, people who, the people, there's people out there who are, there's not really that much of a push for this previous thing that was the number one thing. Batting average was the number one thing forever. And now, the highest paid players are not players who've got great batting averages. There's people who've got why the nationally again. I happen to watch the Oakland A's play the New York Mets, and my Mets lost Jeff McNeil, who had the National League batting title in 2022. He went to Oakland. We gave him away for a trade away, but because he was not considered particularly important, he wasn't particularly important in 2022 when he had the batting title. It didn't matter. But again, that's that data point we decided was, Ted Williams was the guy for the ages. And now, I don't know. It's what statistic we decide is the critical statistic, or in web stuff. I will go even the history of the web. Used to be page. Well, originally it was not even page views. Originally it was hits.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first thing that we were. When I was running analytics and stuff, on websites in the 90s. How many hits were there? How many times did somebody make these requests for stuff? And then we stopped being interested in that and started being interested in page views, and then it got to be unique users, and then it got to be engagement time, and
bounce rate,
blah 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 blah.
It's the bounce rate.
Bounce rate, all that other stuff. It just keeps. And what the next thing is going to be, is going to be a different thing. So what we decide is the important statistic.
Mm-hmm.
Or do you measure what you find important, but also measuring it usually gives overvalues the importance of that thing because you're measuring it and it's the data you happen to have.
Mm.
Yeah, well, there's Heisenberg right there.
And in Harari's narrative, right? He's talking about kind of. Where at one point he says, and he's talking about the Kantian reply to Eichmann, that when we define entities, we must always use the most universal definition applicable, which doesn't strike me as. I mean, I get his point, but it doesn't strike me as sort of universally true. I mean, it seems like there's a level of context that matters, and then there are maybe bigger levels that are less relevant. And I'm thinking, in history, I'm thinking of David Christian's Big History. I don't really care that much about the 13 billion years, before, people on Earth, and so I don't necessarily think of that way. I mean, I think though that stuff's interesting, but I don't think of that in the same way that I think of history. And in fiction, it reminded me of in Asimov. Remember, there's the 3 laws of robotics, but then there's the 0th law. Once the the robots get even smarter and think, well, wait a minute, I can do something. That, I mean, the 0th law says that a robot must not, by action or inaction, allow humanity to come to harm, right? And once they once they kind of reprogram themselves to do that, then then of course they can justify killing people because they're saving humanity. But there are levels at which these these generalizations become kind of more or less relevant. So it's and defining and then he goes on to talk about, is there a way of defining whom computers should care about without getting bogged down into some intersubjective myth, and that's kind of the big question, right?
Yeah, well, that's another weird kind of bias issue that we have is humans, and if you look at the example of genocide as a reasonably good one, when it's a nebulous group of people I don't know in some other country, I'm less likely to care about them. Whereas if I know 1 or 2 individuals, I'm more likely, or even in our situation, I know where Tim is and Tim's not here. I'm more concerned about world, politics because my friend Tim is not here with us today.
Yeah.
And I know Tim, we've seen him for, 3+ years now. and I care more about what's going on in his neighborhood because I know him versus if I don't know Tim, I'm less worried about the neighborhood on the other side of the planet away from me
And it's
where
just
Tim
headline
lives.
news. Yeah.
I think your proposal is invalid. I'm just going to say it straight out. Look at what happened in Rwanda, where you had closely intermingled, and by the way, completely artificial groups between, the Hutu and the who were the other ones?
Tutsis.
Or
The Hutus and the
Yeah.
Tutsis. I don't remember which one killed which.
They
Honestly,
actually both killed each other at different times.
one of them was a lot better at it. One of them, one of them was a lot better at it. And they had a big a big thing. Or forgot, Central and Eastern Europe. There were an awful lot of, again, deeply integrated in their communities, Jews, who the Germans and with a little pushing, Poles and other people were quite, they knew those people.
Hmm.
No, there's a different level because even things like, and I even saw, of one of the children's charities, they don't focus on the millions of kids who are starving. They focus on Sally, Sue, and Johnny, or whatever their, names are.
Hmm.
I don't remember what they were in this particular commercial, but
Yeah,
they focus on individual specific kids
Right.
sure.
specifically because they know that's going to draw you as a viewer who is not in their culture and not in their space into, hey, I can help, even if it's I can help one kid with my $5 donation
Hmm.
or $10 a month, whatever it is. And that it's that level of when you put it at the level of two big warring factions, that's the same thing, and nobody cares what each of the big warring factions are. You know, most of Europe doesn't care about the Republicans and the Democrats or individual Americans. And typically that's why the big guy at the top, the president, is more the seemingly the most important when it's really your your local, county commissioner, people who really are responsible for the day-to-day stuff.
Hmm.
And in general, that has been more the case because the guy at the top has very little they can actually do to influence your day-to-day life. But
Well,
when they do, it's usually an outsized influence on it.
yeah. Well,
Yeah,
the
unless the
Europeans, of
guy
course, are much
decides to
more,
bomb your whole
you
country.
know,
Yeah.
the Europeans are much more affected by who we're at war with than who's, you know, than
Or
the.
butting
Yeah,
up to.
I do agree that at the local, I mean, politics at the local level is ignored way too much. It should be much more of a focus. But
But the other issue too is your local politics don't get the news coverage, so it's harder to know what's going on
yeah,
versus at the national level, the king gets all the press
oh yeah,
and everybody knows what's happening there, whereas you don't know what your local county commissioner just did yesterday
hmm,
or what or why,
yeah,
you know.
That that gets to something interesting right there, though, because I mean, it certainly wasn't that way. For I think for most people, actually, the news that's happening in their neighborhood,
well, there
is
were local papers.
yeah, there were local
Yeah.
papers, but I mean, or the people I mean, the news I pay most attention to is what's happening in my neighborhood or in New York, or but again in the day. Let's go back to in the day. When again local news really was the primary thing. Obviously, these local news outlets have largely died,
Yeah.
but is there a sort of an intentional or not? I don't know if it's intentional or not, but the national politics is fundamentally a distraction.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, it's a
It,
sport. It's an entertainment, just like
right.
baseball or
Like baseball and
basketball
football.
or
Yeah, right.
if we had functional local politics, we would have a functional Congress.
yeah.
Yes,
In fact,
absolutely.
Because
actually, my ability to bet on sports to affect the outcome of the game is just
yeah,
about as good as my ability to vote on an election to affect the outcome of
Yeah,
that game.
yeah.
on the national level, but in your local, in
Well,
the
that's why the local is more important, is because
Right.
my local vote.
Yep. Right. Well, and also there are kind of cumulative effects, right? That's the whole Graeber-Wengrow argument, or at least more of Graeber's argument than Wengrow's. Wengrow just went along for the ride, and as far as that part of the book went, I think. But to go back to Harari, I've been sort of kind of paging through the chapters, and the next thing that I sort of hit on was the baby algorithms section. Right, where he's talking about, in order to learn, baby algorithms need one more thing besides access to data. They also need a goal, and he talks about human babies, learn to walk because they have someplace to go. And, and lion cubs learn to hunt because they're hungry. So what is it that motivates algorithms? And they're, and then the answer that he gives to that is that simple algorithms have simple motivations, like beat a player at chess. More complicated ones run the risk. It sounds like what he was saying of kind of falling into this sort of morass of intersubjective truths.
It's the one algorithm that, like, the guy made the boat go around in circles.
Yeah.
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 Because it didn't know what.
I don't know. I don't think it was an example here, and it was probably something I was reading in evolutionary biology, but there are some animals that kill all their siblings in the same clutch or the same group. And that means mom and dad then give them more food and more attention because all their siblings are dead. And that is a quirky, weird genetic algorithm.
Yeah.
Then once it's done a few times, it's built, it eventually becomes encoded in the DNA, and it's not a moral. In those cases, the morality doesn't enter it because it's built into the code before anything else can happen. And it's only a morality thing after the fact, or a question of were you going to be a good parent or a bad parent because you had 2 kids or 4.
And what do we do? Well, and then that's the question for us, right? Is like, so then what do we do when there's something that, I mean, everybody, sort of nowadays resorts to evolutionary psychology as an explanatory, kind of mechanism, which is, has its place. But, what happens when we run up against that? Well, okay, we're programmed to, to push our siblings out of the nest.
Yeah.
No, and then there's the other side. If you're in a situation where the siblings can actually, when you have cooperative, there's, I think people have talked about the uncle. There's an uncle theorem or whatever, where you tend to actually support the children of your siblings.
Yeah.
I forget the details of it, but it's a thing.
Oh, well,
so it's not in that direct competitive situation.
Well, it's the way they explain. Yeah, it's hive behavior too, like bees and ants and stuff. That they're more closely genetically related.
Yeah, well, again, your genes want to be, they share genetic material with you, and your genes. This gets us all the way back to Dawkins, which I can't
directly to Dawkins because
I can't have a conversation without mentioning Dawkins because I'm stuck in 19 whatever the hell when I wrote.
Oh, so okay, Will's Dawkins, Tim's the West Wing. So we'll have Dawkins while you're here, and then Tim goes back.
Early Dawkins, the selfish gene.
That's the only one I like.
And the extended phenotype were both like, earth-shattering, groundbreaking, interesting.
Only thing I had,
science and philosophy. His later stuff is a lot fluffier, but it's the same thing with Brian Greene. Yeah. We only really needed the first book on, Calabi-Lau spaces. We didn't need the 4 more that followed it, or even maybe the kids' book was probably good to try and explain it to the 5-year-olds.
Sure. Yeah.
But, I don't know if we needed the 4 that followed it, the original.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If so that I guess we've got a half hour left, and we've sort of, in my mind, we've gotten through chapter 8. So if we continue on to chapter 9, then the first thing that jumps out. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And which is a great chapter.
Which is a great chapter, but it begins weirdly. I mean, Hitler and Stalin argued that the Industrial Revolution had unleashed immense powers. No, they didn't. Maybe their ministers of propaganda did, but there's an historicity in this chapter that I
Okay, I'm
annoyed me.
going to disagree a little bit, specifically on at least on the Hitler end of things. So Hitler was a fascist, and he got his actual inspiration from Mussolini.
Yeah.
And Mussolini, even in like art. So the thing I really remember about this with Mussolini is there was a wonderful art exhibit at the Guggenheim a few years ago about Italian futurism, which was the sort of the state art, not exactly, but it was the art, it was the art of the fascists,
right?
Proto enduring, and futurism was completely focused on airplanes and industrialism, and of course it was Italian, so it was actually really cool looking instead of the terrible. The Nazi art was just boring Aryan crap. But this was like
Bauhaus
awesome.
brutalist bullshit.
Not even Bauhaus brutalism. This is more of that sort of pretend that photo the neoclassicist bull.
Oh yeah,
crap.
yeah.
Boring anodyne neoclassicist crap.
Yeah.
But that futurism, that's very much in fascism is that. Oh, industry is going to change everything. This is amazing. Industry and technology is the new thing. So
I agree with you, but that's Mussolini. That's not Hitler or Stalin.
Yeah. But he certainly was an inspiration for both. He was the prototype, frankly.
He was the inspiration. He was certainly the inspiration for Hitler. And yeah, probably Stalin too. But I still think that it's inaccurate to say that Hitler's critique was focused on that. I think that in the same way that that German neoclassical architecture was crap. I think Hitler's philosophy was kind of crap, especially and was not And I'll grant you that the Italians were thinking about that kind of stuff. I don't believe that Hitler and his guys were in the way that Harari wants to just kind of establish with just kind of a single sentence there.
Okay. And that's the issue too, is you can say, hey, we would like to do X, so we're going to do these 5 things, but you may be able to predict 1 or 2 levels out.
Yeah.
But you're never able to, the complexity of what's going on and how everyone reacts, which I think is one of the most interesting things about Donald Trump as a president, who doesn't seem to be able to think even past step 1, what step 2 and 3 look like. And it probably is saving our country that the institutions are what they are and have been for so long. And then it takes a generation or 2 to dramatically shift things, because he's trying to shift things within not even 1 generation, but less than a quarter of a generation.
Yeah.
He's having an awful lot of problem and pushback as a result. And I'm kind of surprised that I haven't seen the meta articles of, you see the daily articles of this court said this or that was either pro-Trump or anti-Trump, but no one seems to have gone in and looked at the data of how often have courts at different levels pushed back at, or how often is it that an individual state brings a suit against the government and a sitting president in the first place based on policies. But it seems like almost every day there is either 1 or 2 suits brought against this government, or 1 or more that are being decided either for or against. And I don't remember in any prior administration almost anyone ever talking about, oh, somebody brought up a suit against the Reagan administration for this policy or that policy. Like I can't name a single, or
on the environmental end particularly.
And surely they did, and it happened, but it seems to be literally a daily or a weekly occurrence for this administration.
But would you say that when Reagan was around, the Congress and the Senate actually sort of operated and did their jobs. Do we have more litigation now because we don't have any type of other checks and balances?
now we get into though, but again, then we get into sort of one of his later things, and again, I don't know if we're quite there yet when he's like, when he talks about the conservative suicide,
Mhm.
which is, and that's I think one of the reasons we've got all of these lawsuits is, this is the flip, and I would even sort of back up a little bit and say, that flip of, we've gone from, conservatism used to be, sorry, the right wing used to be actually conservative, as in let's, slow down,
Well,
let's
yeah.
slow down and preserve things, and that's, this flip that we get, in Trump, and I would think it's actually there's a reasonable argument to say we started even a few years before then with the Tea Party.
Yeah.
Well, for one thing, there's 16 years we're at, so we're most of a generation through it already.
Yeah.
But we have all of these, lawsuits because that we didn't have before,
Yeah.
because it's the first time we've had in I think any of our lifetimes we've had this level of attempted revolution.
Well, also because I think that I like the way he describes conservatism as being that negative force, right? The force of let's not be activists, let's not be positive, let's not change things, let's conserve whatever it is we got, whether it is whether it's he talks about it in terms of religion and other types of cultural commitments, right? Whatever it is that we have, let's try not to abruptly and kind of precipitously move away from that, right? And that
Yeah.
actually I think is the thing that you don't have,
What wasn't the quote from William F. Buckley? The conservatism is the brave thing of standing in front of progress and saying no.
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing, but
Right.
I think, yeah.
No, I think that's exactly it. Yeah. And I think that, and before he talks about that, he talks about, I think just in the section in chapter 9, before he talks about that, he talks about, this liberal democracy and how it possesses a strong self-correcting mechanism, which limits the excesses of fanaticism and preserves the ability to recognize our errors and try different courses of action. Well, again, I kind of object to that a little bit because he's again saying, oh, before just this recent moment, we didn't have, that democracy did operate as advertised, right? And that there was that it worked, and now it doesn't work, and it worked as per its definition, and so this might be one of the ways that I kind of more generally disagree with Harari is that he's sort of kind of seems to be assuming or sort of positing at a bunch of different moments a sort of a uniform and consistent pattern of history until this moment of that he seems to be sort of blaming this technology for, and I think that's a little bit problematic.
I mean, I think he certainly sees it as there's things that could happen that, if certain things happen, that's something we'll need to blame people on. I mean, really, again, that I love his specific sort of calling out the, when did corporations getting, where things other than people become legal people,
right?
Where corporate personhood,
yep.
Does that eventually lead to, this idea that, algorithms just, they're their own thing,
right.
Maybe even algorithms have rights or
yeah, that's problematic. It's already, to me, corporations can be people, but we need to be able to execute the corporation.
Yeah.
And
they can't be immortal people.
It needs to be, there needs to be a more one-to-one onto mapping of personhood with corporations if we're gonna treat them that way as legal entities, and similarly with AIs if it comes to that. But
absolutely. Well, that was the thing. I mean, and that doesn't go back just to Citizens United. That goes back to the 14th, the misuse of the 14th Amendment, right? And so, the idea that
personhood's not till like that train. It was a train thing in the 1880s or something. Yeah. It was
right. And the idea that these will be treated as people in court cases, but also will be immortal and will have limited liability, right? And all of these other things that they kind of snuck in and grandfathered in, once they, because the logical thing would have been to say, well, wait a minute, if we're going to have personhood, let's have mortality, right? And let's have full liability, and let's have all these other things.
Well, but to that time too, corporations, except for the East India Trading Company, didn't last hundreds of years. And even now it's very hard. I remember it's been less than 15 years that Evernote popped up as a business, and the guy was like all gung ho, like this business it's going to last 100 years, and if I have anything to say about it, even more.
Mhm.
I don't even remember the last time somebody mentioned the name Evernote to me
Yeah.
as, hey, should I use this, not use this?
Mhm.
And it's, he didn't even make 2 decades.
Yeah, but it was. I mean, some of the it was, and Will's right. It was about the time of the railroads. They are probably the first of the truly immortal. And then all of the kind of big extractive industries that sort of came up at the same time.
Even the very concept of a corporation is relatively new. It's one thing for them to be around forever, but a actual limit. The point of a corporation, it's a limited liability company fundamentally. I think.
Yep.
I think again, and that idea that you're not going to be liable, you the owner, or you one of the owners of a business, when your business goes does something bad,
Absolutely.
that idea that there's that liability can be
Mm-hmm.
pushed off is
right.
Well, that's the problem though, is when
150
you're a mining corporation, you have limited liability. So the owners of the corporation then take all the money out of the corporation
Right.
and walk away when all the bad things the corporation did.
Right,
Oh,
and that does explain some
corporation.
of the mortality of some of these corporations, which wouldn't otherwise have needed to have ended, but they got left holding the bag when all of their shareholders took the profits out.
Or if you're, doing a US wide opioid, scandal.
Sacklers, yeah.
The Sackler family walks away with it and all the glory, and it's incumbent upon the court of public opinion to destroy the Sacklers, because there's no real legal recourse for it.
I'd be very interested where did that really start of the owners aren't responsible for what's happening, for in the business.
The two historians who kind of deal with that a lot are Morton Horowitz, who was a legal historian at Harvard, who wrote The Transformation of American Law. He wrote 2 volumes, one that goes to about 1860 and then one that goes beyond 1860. And then his student, who was an environmental historian, was Ted Steinberg, who he had a great committee. He had Horowitz, he had David Hackett Fisher, he just, and he wrote a book called Nature Incorporated, which applied Horowitz's legal principles to the water-based textile industry in New England. So the Waltham mills along the Charles River, and then especially the Lowell, Lawrence, Nashua, Manchester mills along the Merrimack River. And he shows, and so Steinberg demonstrates kind of what Horowitz had said more generally, that it wasn't really, there never really was this legal change, and Will, it also includes what you were talking about, how the understanding of corporations changed over time, right? That we never had any legislation that said, okay, now let's think of corporations this way, or now let's kind of change, from
personhood was a footnote to the opinion. It wasn't actually part of the opinion.
Well, it was an unintended consequence of the 14th Amendment, really. And so, but what Horowitz says is that all of this happens very gradually, and not from any type of legislation at all, and not from any type of public debate or decision making, but instead from lower court property law cases. And so it's basically case law precedent that kind of changes this thing very broadly. And he says, and this was done and Horowitz actually was kind of a conspiracy theorist. He said this was done deliberately by the business owners and the legal professions who were sort of kind of in cahoots because if nothing else, they were in cahoots in the George Carlin way of having shared interests and certainly being from a shared community of waspy New England old money and so that they were able to make these changes. And then he said the final stage of this was that after the changes had been made, they covered their tracks by then making law in America seem like this woman with the blindfold and the scales, this kind of very objective, very, very august and very impartial thing, which it had never really been. But then they create this whole kind of myth and legend around what law is in America in order to avoid having to talk about how it came about.
This, because I can't forget this. How do you spell? It's Norman
Horwitz.
Okay, I'm just putting this in the chat so that I don't forget it.
Morton Horwitz.
Morton, thank you.
What I love though is, media personalities like Bill O'Reilly who like to rail against judges litigating from the bench.
Yep.
Never seem to give a shit about
it's manufactured consent.
We're sort of litigating from the bench.
Yep.
Yep. And now you can lie in front of Congress about generalities of what you think as a judge, and then once you're on the bench, just totally go the other direction.
Yep.
But those are the sorts of, and that's kind of the pain of the intersubjective realities that we all live by. And it dawns on me, especially as we go into this chapter 9, which I'm sure we'll delve more deeply into next week. But the Sunday morning political talk shows used to actually take a shared set of facts and then debate which was the better way to go politically in terms of legislation or what was happening. Here's what's going on. Do we do this or do we do that? And sometime it started in the 80s, got worse in the 90s, and just miserable in the 2000s. People started showing up with talking points only.
Yeah.
They didn't come with, or sometimes they would come with facts, but usually they were arguing end results rather than saying, hey, here's a shared set of facts and definitions. And if we do this, this may happen, or if we do that, that may happen. And
talking past each other.
Yeah. Conversation, but they just totally began talking past each other. And now we're stuck with this identity politics that, there's no logic in any of the anythings.
Well, and I think a major element of that is that sort of conflation of rationales with reasons.
Yeah.
But do you remember, you're speaking, I don't know if you remember when Jon Stewart went on Crossfire.
Oh, yeah.
And, basically told both the people who are on it, you are destroying, what you're doing is killing democracy.
He was right. I love that. That's one of his high points for me. Yeah.
Though, I mean, again, that debate still exists that you're talking about. We still got it on PBS. It's called Washington Week in Review. I mean, and on the weekends, and then and then we got the News Hour every week, every night, where people are not debating; they're actually discussing what's going on. But it is. Well, unfortunately, but if it bleeds, it leads, though, and people screaming at each other and having a verbal cage match is more. It gets better ratings.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. There's a format like that, like Crossfire and like the McLaughlin Report and like all those things that used to happen. But now, Piers is using it to just get people on to yell at each other a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And so he's sort of Jerry Springerized it.
Well, or we've gotten to the point too that you have what are cable news networks, and a huge portion, and it's probably just about as bad on all the sides, but a
Yeah.
huge portion of those cable news networks aren't about covering news and facts and what's actually happening, but are really a bunch of talking heads pontificating about, you
Hmm.
know, they're no better than us. They don't have a book that they're actually talking about.
Yeah.
They're just
Yeah.
totally making it up as they go along. Like,
Right.
and the number of time, and what kills me is the number of times that I see people parroting back the silly shit that they're talking about. And even worse on the kind of the far right side, the one of their basic tenets is, did you do your own research?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
they all seem to think they're doing their own research by watching these talking heads.
Hmm.
And that's not research. There's no facts, there's no grounding in actual reality.
Yeah.
So the research you're doing is, what did random crazy person on TV think,
Yeah.
and not what actually happened during the day, and then what might happen tomorrow as a result of that thing that happened,
Yeah.
and actual or looking at what Dan Alasso might have said about these two legal historians in the last century,
Yeah.
going that's doing research.
Well, it's weird though because sometimes you have, people who get sort of trotted out to say something that you know what they're going to say already. So like when like Jeffrey Sachs or John Mearsheimer, get pulled into one of these panels or one of these one-on-ones or even just as a single guest to talk about, the wars. No, there's nobody has any doubt about what they're going to say. I mean, they've written books about it. And they are, well researched books. It was kind of funny. I found a Jeffrey Sachs book on my shelf as I was, what I did up there in Bemidji this week was I boxed up a bunch of books, and there was a, one of his big books on globalization was on my shelf, and it was like, oh, I gotta actually, this will be a keeper. I'll read this. So I had just at one point bought it and stuck it on the shelf. So you know what these guys are going to say, and yet, you know, what they have to say is valid, and they can apply it to the news of the day or whatever. So so there is kind of a place for that, some of that, even when you sort of know what it's going to be.
But there's the news, and then the further away you get, the so Bill O'Reilly was not news. He was the philosophy, and I'm going to tell you what I think about what happened in the news,
Hmm.
and be outraged because of whatever that thing was,
Yeah,
because we're just going in the wrong direction.
yeah,
Fuck it, we're gonna do it live.
it was
But,
commentary. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but he would selectively cherry pick.
Yep.
Yeah.
He was Potemkin creating a village,
Yeah.
for the viewership to see.
Hmm.
But because he had the prime time slot and was spewing the rage and what you wanted to hear,
Yeah,
instead of watching, you'd probably have been better off watching Family Ties reruns in that hour,
probably.
and you'd be a better conservative as a result of it.
Well, the
Michael P.
question
Keaton.
is,
Michael
you know,
Peaky. Yeah.
was he filling? Was he only putting out, or was he responding to what people wanted to hear? Was he much like the obsequious letting chat GPT telling you what you want to hear, but letting you get into a circle? He was reinforcing things people wanted to hear,
Yeah.
is my nickel. And now was he driving it a little bit? Sure. But
So where was Bill O'Reilly trained? Where did he start out? What was his job before he was Bill O'Reilly?
Inside Edition, which is entertainment reporting,
Cur-
that's where the "fuck it, we're going to do it live" quote is from,
Mm.
because it
Current
was
affairs. It was the space where if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah.
yeah, but it was it was basically
Right.
entertainment reporting, syndicated, afternoon entertainment report.
I actually have a friend who is a dyed in the wool, serious Democrat,
Mhm.
and he started out as a newspaper guy. I think he was one of the early guys at the Baltimore City paper, and then he left. He went to New York and he worked for the Village Voice. And a young strapping lad from Australia stole him away because he wanted to do newspapers and media in the Americas. So, Rupert said, "Hey, I'd like you to like work for me." So he did some newspaper stuff for Rupert for a minute, and then Rupert said, "I'm going to create a TV network. You should move to Los Angeles."
Mm.
And he was the one who created the format for, and hired Bill O'Reilly.
Wow.
He's like, I feel like I single-handedly just fucked American media 6 ways to
At the
Sunday.
same time,
It's like it's my fault.
did he hire Matt Groening to make The Simpsons?
I think he was at 20th Television by that point, so
Because
I don't know that he was in that. But
The Fox network. I mean, that was the main thing it really had was Married with Children and Married with Children and The Simpsons before anybody cared about the news part of it.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he brought up and trained most of the stand-up news people that came out of the Fox empire for almost 20 years.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
Tom Bergeron and he probably gave, what's his name, our favorite right-wing podcaster, Joe Rogan. I'm pretty sure he found and trained Joe Rogan.
Oh, Fear Factor.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were. So Bill O'Reilly's obnoxious, right, and objectionable for that reason. But I had sort of brought up Sachs and Mearsheimer, right? So how are they different? I mean, I think that that whether you agree with them or disagree with them, Sachs and Mearsheimer have information behind their opinion.
They've done work. They're doing something. Whereas I think, and Bill O'Reilly,
you won an Emmy.
Appears to
tells us that
as it relates to this chapter on conversation, he appears to be having a conversation because he's got guests on and he's interviewing them. But usually, if you didn't have a view that jived with his, there was no conversation. He would shut you down and
my show,
devolved into yelling or grumpiness.
Mm-hmm.
And there were not enough people who were like, hey, this is not a conversation. It's not a debate.
Yeah.
It's my way or the highway. And not enough people got up and walked off the set, leaving him with dead air.
Right.
Which would have been a better result. But they were picking people who they could kind of or keeping the time period. Your segment's 4 minutes.
Right.
So we're not going to get deep enough into any.
And it was never live.
Conversation.
It was never live, so he could always, bring somebody else in.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for next week,
that conversation, but the conversation, at least, it's a bunch of people who are. Your examples are well enmeshed in the area. They really know what's going on to a deep level, which is why I kind of like or think it's interesting when news programs bring on academics who've spent 20 years studying Iran.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're reading the local newspapers in the local language to know what's going on, what's happening. They have friends, they have contacts, and they have context that they can bring to bear. Whereas Bill O'Reilly only had his gut reaction of this is the way it is.
Yeah.
And that, that doesn't really add to a conversation. It just, or elicits thought or emotion. He's there to elicit emotion, not to elicit, hey, what should we do about this thing?
Yeah.
He's already solved the problem.
Thank God.
And here's where we have to go because that's the only solution.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're just starting this chapter 9 conversation. So we should probably plan on doing it and 10 and 11. Just finish up for next week.
Yeah.
All right.
The epilogue is short.
Yeah. So next book. Do we want to talk about that? before we go? Because I was thinking about, I was looking at this, at the suggestions, and in the newer suggestions one, close to the top, was that biography of Hoover, which Herbert, not J. Edgar, which I thought, kind of looked a little bit interesting. And I was thinking, kind of maybe we might want a change of pace, because there were another, scrolling down the list, and especially in the 4+ votes ones, there was, war by other means and white poverty and, only the rich can play, which all, would kind of be a continuation of this, thing that we've been talking about for a while. And I thought it might be kind of fun to have a break. The other thing that's in there with 4 votes is, of course, who we are and how we got there, which would also be kind of a change of pace. I don't know that the 3 of us, probably should decide. We should probably put a kind of I'll put a poll. I'll put a poll up on the not the book suggestion one, but the community forum, and let people kind of weigh in.
I do like the change of pace point on Hoover, but yeah, I also
We need a palate cleanser after all this.
I think so. Yeah, I think this is. It's not bad that we've been kind of digging into this stuff, but we have been doing it for a little while.
Yeah.
Or just to change a pace for a change of pace, or something that's like not as dense as this.
Mm-hmm.
Also, so we can, or at least so that I can go back and reread it one more time after we're done.
All right, fair enough. Okay, so
I almost think for the anniversary coming up in, was it late October or November, we should say, hey, you know what, let's go back and revisit, Wingrove and Graeber.
Everything, yeah.
How have things changed in the logically?
Yep.
Since the dawn of time. And 4 years
and I do think there would be some additional insights to be had in there. Yeah.
Is it worth like picking? I don't know. What do you have? Like you said, you're going to do a poll. Do you want like 3?
Yeah. What 3 do you think would be good to ask them about?
I think we all like the Hoover idea for one.
Right. Hoover's one.
Oh, I think a straight up the middle historical biography is that just it as a general concept could be cool. Whatever that happens to be is
okay.
Inconsequential, but I think as a palate cleanser, that's probably an easy thing for us.
Yeah.
I would vote for white poverty being on the list.
Okay. Where's that one? Oh, wait a minute.
It got a lot of votes. Chris, it was your idea, so.
Yeah, I still.
It's in the 4 or more. Okay, it's in the 4 or more.
Although I don't know that's
It's not a palate cleanser.
It's not a palate cleanser.
It's not the palate cleanser.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I really want to do it, but.
The who we are and how we got here
would also be a palate cleanser. So that would be Why don't we do that? Why don't we do those 3? Who we are. Because that would be those, so that would give people 2 options that are palate cleansers and one that is a continuation. That's fair.
Well, I think even though I think they're all 3 of them are sort of, well, actually, I mean, both the Hoover and the white poverty are more about history, right? Whereas the who we are is more about sort of big ideas.
Well, it has. I mean, it's bigger. It's longer. It's a longer duration of history, but it's still, it's got a history element. The other thing that only got 3 votes, and I did vote for it, was American Nations.
That could be a good one. I'd do that.
What was that? Yeah, there's no law. We have to only have 3.
Yeah.
American Nations. Where's that? What's that about?
That gets 3 votes. That's the history of the 11 rival regional cultures of North America.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
All right, I'll add that. We'll have a choice of 4.
Yeah.
And actually, I'll try to do ranked choice voting.
There we go.
Yeah. So I'll ask people for their top 3 of the 4 or something like that. We'll see. We'll see if maybe we'll attract Thomas or Pat or somebody to come back.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Well, thanks. This was a fun conversation.
Absolutely.
Have a good week.
And I'm really looking forward to I'm gonna go see if I can find that Horowitz book. That looks amazing.
Yeah, he was really something. And that those were the only he was at Harvard for a long time, and those are kind of his two. And I think he won some pickle for like a Bancroft or something. So
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
yeah. All right. Ciao.
We're gonna
Yes.